Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm so glad you came to the show today with Ganbaru, that inner spirit and drive to reshore and reindustrialize this country.
We're excited on one of these first shows to bring Zane Hengsperger, who, as of 24 hours ago, the general manager of Delta 70, a racking systems company based out of Ontario. The reason we were really excited to talk to Zane, Zane, with some investors, bought a company. Let's start just with a little bit of background, and you can go back as far as you want. Like, where'd you grow up? Like, what made you want to get your hands dirty?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Excited to be here and love the mission of this podcast. So basically, I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, which is a stone's throw from Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan, obviously Motor City, big automotive town, and Windsor is kind of this auxiliary factory town for Detroit. So
And for 18-year-olds in the US to go get drunk.
exactly, maybe play some blackjack, whatever they want to do. But yeah, everyone's mom and dad at school worked in a factory, whether it's the big Chrysler plant or a small shop, everything in between. Maybe in something like Magna, Flex and Gate, those types of people. And I was one of those kids where their parents worked in manufacturing. So when I was 14, I started scrubbing the floors. I got promoted to a lathe. I did some tool building. I knew nothing about what I was doing, but I was like, hey, this is kind of interesting. I went off to college at the University of Michigan and did some marketing and sales at the same time. It's kind of like, I don't want to call it internship, but I was trying to make some money. At that time, I didn't really care about manufacturing, which I think kind of speaks to a lot of the problem in manufacturing, where it's not people's fault. But just to continue the story, I ended up going to Uber for 3 months. I was kind of obsessed with the whole software is eating the world thing. I ended up starting my own company, and it was fun. It was kind of like this small software company. But it was kind of at a weird time where some guys from the machine shop saw what I was doing. They're like, hey, we want to buy a machine shop. Would you like to come help us? So I was like, that's kind of interesting. So I had to make a decision. Am I going to continue to work on the software problem, or do I really want to go back to manufacturing? That's kind of what everyone does. I wasn't too enthralled with it, but it was at a very pivotal time where reindustrialize was going on in Detroit. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to that. And I was like, oh my God, this is really cool. I started doing some more research. There's a great paper by Contrarian Research on Hadrian about how we're losing machine shops. And I was like, wait, this is a really important problem. Maybe this is my calling back to manufacturing. And then from there, I kind of did due diligence on some companies. We really searched for the right one, and that ended up on Delta 70.
Obviously, the real story here is that you did get the bug and you are feeling like you found your calling. But what was it about manufacturing where when it clicked that you were like, wait, this actually means more to me than being another SaaS vendor?
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was working on this SaaS product, and it was cool. It was learning a ton. I'm not technical by any means, but I was doing sales and working on product management stuff. And I was like, okay, I got to give this factory thing a try. It seems like an incredible opportunity. I've always wanted to kind of grow a business, and this is something I have some experience in. And the pivotal moment for me, I'll actually always remember is getting back and literally stepping foot into the factory and being like, oh my God, the smell came back. It was almost it's almost too corny to think about, but it was pretty awesome. I was guys were working, there was huge molds moving across the factory. There's overhead cranes, there's forklifts. Guys were talking about jobs, solving complex problems. And I was like, wow, I need to learn more about this. And then reindustrialize was kind of just the nail on the hammer. I did a ton of research into everyone, what they were building, how it's kind of cool again, how you can create big, sustainable, long lasting businesses. And that's what I wanted to do. So yeah, that was the moment.
So the folks who, when you walked in the door, how many people were working at the company?
That was a 200-person company. So this wasn't Delta 70. This was a different company that we were diligencing at the time. And it was a machine shop in Detroit. So I was working on getting my visa too.
All right, so let's talk about Delta 70. So you walked in there, did your diligence. How many people were working the floor of the factory?
There were 12 people, and I was there today, and there's 12.
And what is the age range of these folks?
It's your very exactly what you'd think. It's you're 35 to about there's a 78-year-old there too.
How do you imagine that moving forward? We're reshoring, we're reindustrializing. How do you imagine we can get more young people to want to enter these roles so we have a supply of folks who can be machinists?
Yeah, I actually think it's one of the most important questions that we should be asking right now. And I'm still exploring that question. I think I've asked it a lot of times, and kind of the answers I continue to get from peers and friends is money. It really seems like that's the main driver. So I think the way of achieving that is through productivity. So um, kind of going to these businesses, automating them, reindustrializing them, modernizing them, and kind of treating them as like technology businesses. I think there's a few interesting companies doing this, like Atomic and Hadrian, where young folks are actually stepping into these factories. The harder problem is, how do you reindustrialize the old factories? How do you get people in there? Um, I think a lot of the money is kept up top with a lot of the owners. So I think there kind of has to be a bit of a cultural shift where pay structures can like depend more on your performance or growth, which I think.
When you and your investment partners were scouting businesses, like what were you looking for? Were you looking purely for, revenue, top line, and all of that stuff? Were you looking in certain industries? Like what were your filters when you were considering businesses?
Well, we were interested in machine shops that like had the infrastructure to scale. So when we went into a shop, it had to have updated machines. We didn't want to spend a bunch on capex. That was kind of like one of our concerns, and it'll tie nicely how we got to Delta 70 later. But also, we were looking for companies with good labor rates. So are they effectively managing a team and producing like a certain profit based on their headcount? We're looking for health, like financial health. So do they have too much AR or payables that they can't manage? So we're kind of going in it with like almost how you look at any business, but like a bit of a magnifying glass on the headcount and the capex spend.
Give me a little sense of the shop itself. Like what's the square footage? Like what kind of machines are there? Like what are people doing day to day?
Yeah, so it's a 30,000 square foot kind of flex shop because it's really interesting because it has these holes in the wall that slide open. They're probably like 40 years old. So you can get a 40-foot or 20-foot long steel tube through the side of the door. There's punch presses, there's iron workers, there's shears, and there's a ton of welding. That's why we love this business, is because it's very OpEx heavy, not CapEx heavy. You want to scale to, you know, double your capacity, 4 times your capacity, 10 times your capacity. You're getting more welders, maybe a few more saws. You're not buying CNC machines, or you're not buying huge injection molds. Um, so yeah, and then there's 12 guys. There's me and another awesome lady in the office, and the rest of the guys are on the floor.
I think people that haven't ever walked into any sort of line factory wouldn't understand why this isn't something you just go to Uline and buy something universal. Like, why would a company come to Delta 70 and buy custom racking? What are the types of clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Tesla makes a Model 3, and that has a very specific bumper or an A-pillar that no other car has. That needs to go on like a tight tolerance rack that not only you can fit the optimal amount of A-pillars on, but it also has to fit into their automation system so the robot can go and pick up the part and put it on the car. So it's got to protect the part, it's got to fit it perfectly, and it's got to work with their systems. It's basically the same frame every time, maybe different sizes, but it's really those like steel tubes and the foam that really hug the part and make it tight.
I get that this is a relatively low capex business, where it's at, and that you're picking it up with some clients already in place. But there's got to be some changes in investment that are on your punch list. Like, what are you looking at over the next, call it 6 to 12 months, more from an operations standpoint, and less than the manufacturing side? Like, what are some really obvious things for somebody coming from, SaaS and software and modern businesses? When you step into this manufacturing business, you're like, man, we got to have that day one.
Well, most of these small shops and like a lot of the ones we viewed don't have like a sales team at all. Like when I walked into this company, there's no sales team. There was the owner who did operations and sales, and there was the office lady who did HR, taxes, and sales. But there's really no dedicated person who was going out and shaking hands and making new connections. That's why they had the same 12 customers, maybe 20 customers for the past 50 years. So some of the best things you can do on day one is hire an awesome salesperson from someone who's done this before. So that's kind of one of the main things I'm looking to do. bring in someone who's sold custom steel racks for the last 10, 20 years, and hopefully we can give them a good comp package and incentivize them to sell a lot of racks. Otherwise, there's a lot of like small tech things you can do. Like I, uh, I'm always kind of wary of saying this, but like we added a LinkedIn, we added a website just to like start, like all of our customers are on LinkedIn, and we need to have some sort of funnel so that they can come to us. That's something that worked at another company and it just took time. So like starting those engines now is really important. Basically your funnels to like capture customers when you're not directly selling to them. And the other thing we're kind of looking at is how do we streamline our quoting process? Right now it's very manual. It takes us 2 hours. We literally do it on pen and paper, and we have a stack, almost as tall as me in the corner of the building. It's actually insane. So how do you digitize that and get some more data on your processes from quoting, sales? What do you win loss? So it's really kind of just taking all your information that you're already doing and digitalizing it.
Well, so one of the most interesting things I saw on your Twitter was the highest ROI thing you can have in the office is 4 business cards taped to the wall. You unpack that story.
Yeah. So actually, the ROI is having a business card that you give to someone and they tape it to their wall. So when I walked in to all these shops that we were diligencing, like you realize everyone, all their buying list is just right in front of their eyes. It's like these business cards. So I went out and got 500 printed, but manufacturing is this really old school industry. It's built on handshakes. It's built on trust, and it's also built on being in front of the customer as much as you can, right? Because it's not recurring revenue. So I think one of the best things you can do is, the business card is kind of a symbol of being in front of them all the time. But get business cards and hand them out. I used to think it was the cringiest thing in the world. But I know when our purchasing agent, which is our front office lady, buys, she's on her computer, she looks up and she says, "Oh, yeah, that's what I'm going to spend 50K on today."
That's funny because I remember my dad, he had a small business he ran for 55 years, and he had like 10 business cards taped to his wall that he never used a computer in his life, and he was very successful. And how many times in the last 25 years I've been like looking for the email from the guy or like searching my phone if I didn't tag it correctly. It's such a simple thing. Honestly, I love that. I had to, Joel, please don't kick me for this when we see each other in person next. I hate when people are like, "I had virtual card QR code." Oh, it's just like, ugh. How
You
about that
you you're
and a
implying
paper
that I
card?
love that kind of stuff too, which
Well,
yeah.
don't you? Don't you?
This gets into some other stuff for me. You're painting a good picture. You got a long lead time, I would imagine, to build relationships with these customers, even if the orders might be, relatively short turnaround. Do you have a sense yet? And I know it's only been officially 24 hours, but like you've kind of been involved in the business for a few weeks already. Like, do you have a sense of like how they're going to perceive you both as a younger guy, but also as a new owner? Have you had any experiences with that yet, where people are positively or negatively like responding to the new ownership?
Yeah, I've definitely done a lot of research on that. I think that's one thing I'm actually like, frankly, a little bit scared about is, being a young guy and, how do you gain respect? I try to ask a lot of questions to start. One customer came in and he started, so to go back a little bit, one of the best things you can do is keep the actual owner on like a package for like a year or two. So he can start introducing and still do some of the sales. But he brings in this customer. I'm a little nervous. One of the first things I ask him is, how have our past orders been? How can we be a better supplier? And he looked at me, he's like, no one's ever asked me that. Like, thank you. So I think it's just like being a little vulnerable, not being afraid to say like, hey, we've been here for 50 years, but how can we be better? Asking questions. I try to, make it about them. I don't try to talk about me too much, and try to make sure their needs are taken care of. So it'll be slow. It'll be a bit of an uphill battle. I'm doing my best, but always looking for advice there too.
And so actually, wait a second, what was the answer? Like, what did he want you to change?
Our paint sucked apparently. So actually went and bought a new paint hose today, which was $1,000. And then I think we got to replace our paint gun, which is about another 7 grand.
Okay, let's go into some actual racking detail here. Why don't you guys powder coat? Why are you painting and not powder coating?
I think powder coat lines are really expensive, and powder coat lines are kind of for smaller parts, in my opinion. Like racks are usually like 500 pounds. You actually have to move it into a paint booth with a forklift. and paid them. So I think it's just like the size of the part.
Uh, without, you don't have to blow up the terms of your deal or anything, but you said that the previous owner is sticking around for a couple of years to help with the transition. And, that's become, whether it's through like an owner financing deal or just a deal that's structured with that transition period baked in. Um, you know, what, what was that like? Like, the owner reaches a point, he's built this business. He's, I'm presuming it's a guy, gets to a point where he's ready to clear out and makes that jump, but then is still like, okay, I'm going to stick around and help move things forward. I know it's still early, but like, what were those discussions like? Like,
Yeah, you know what I find. I've talked to a few of these owners, and they're kind of mostly the same. They're mostly good guys who built a business. They one always say they want to see their business continue to do well. No one ever says, I don't care, go ahead. They have this sense of pride, which is really interesting. And the second thing is you kind of just want to ask them a lot of questions and get to know them. And you'll find that they want to be involved. They don't want to leave on day one. And I think a lot of that is to do with how you structure a deal. It's also like, I'm sure you guys know this, but it's also very common that there's an earnout or there's some sort of incentive to stay on. So it's really just asking them a lot of questions. What do you really want from this? Do you want to go on a beach and sip martinis? Or do you want to do that in 2 years? You want to be able to, stick around, make sure the guys are all good. And usually they want to see their business continue to do well and are happy to help out for a bit. So we're not asking this owner to be there 24/7 or kind of in the same role as before, but we had a discussion with him. It's like, what do you actually want to do? And it ended up being more of a sales role.
You mentioning again, I love your Twitter is very entertaining. I can see why several people have said it's one of the most important accounts to follow on reshoring. You said that one of the you didn't realize uh, how basically every nut, bolt, rivet, and screw, no matter who's selling it, comes from Taiwan or China. And this is one of those things that I was not aware of. But if let's just imagine shooting war breaks out and the shipping lanes to Taiwan are also blocked, um, our manufacturing goes to a standstill. Does anybody anywhere manufacture rivets, bolts, nuts, and screws in this country or anywhere else we can get them quickly and cheaply?
Well, the answer is yes. There's definitely a guy in Wisconsin because some guy cold called me from that tweet, and said, "Hey, I saw your tweet. Are you looking for fasteners? I make them in the USA." And he says, "There's definitely people that can do them, but even this guy will admit they can't do it for cheaper. So if that were to happen, every price would go up, and essentially everything becomes more expensive to
But
build and
how much
manufacture."
more do they cost coming from him? Is it 2x? Is it 5x?
I didn't ask him the pricing, and like again, this was like kind of new to me. Like I just assumed, oh, we manufacture these things too. But when I went to my friend came in and he wanted to sell me fasteners. He was like almost bragging that they came from Taiwan and not China. And I'm like, wait, that's not good either. I don't think like we should be making them here or sourcing them here. But I don't know the exact number. That's something I would love to know. So if you do find out, that'd be interesting.
tell us a little bit about the steel. Like, are you bringing in bar stock and doing any like pressing or bending inside? Does that get done by somebody before it touches the factory? Like, walk us through like, as much detail as you can, especially on the raw materials side. Very curious about that.
Yeah. So basically, we'll just bring in like 3 to 5 very standard sizes of tubes. So a tube will either be like 2 by 2 length and width, and then have a different wall. So the gauge. So we're essentially buying 5 variations of that, and that's kind of what you need to make a rack. So again, it's very easy. It's very like low on the capex. You don't have to store too much because you know exactly what you need, or you can buy in bulk if you can afford it and kind of get your cost down. But essentially, we bring in these long tubes, 20 footers, sometimes 40 footers, and we line them up on various saws. And you're either saw cutting it, which takes a little longer, but you get a more of a slicker cut, or you can iron work it, which is basically this big press that makes a big boom and kind of chops it. It's a little more rough, but if you're doing a weld on it, it doesn't really matter. Um, but essentially, we have our saw guys going while our other guys are preparing the weld, and it's a very simple process. So long tube, we're not bending it, we're just welding, which makes it really easy.
So I would imagine, and you've got some customers up on the website, but I would imagine like a majority of the customers for you are in the greater Detroit like area, probably a lot of, the aerospace and automotive factories that are there.
Yeah, so we go about as far as Tennessee right now, and some like Colorado here and there. I think we could definitely go to LA or Texas. What the function is, I think it's a function of handshakes. I think it's a function of how far um, the previous team was willing to drive to meet these customers. Obviously, the shipping is an issue, but it's usually not a deal breaker. Like we don't mind covering the shipping if it's going to get a job done, or we can lower our price if it's going to get a job done. So
One of the things you talk about a lot is that you track the profit margin on every single thing that you make, that you sell, every single thing. Uh, what were they doing before you showed up?
I think he was doing it in his head, like almost like he's going off vibes. He says he wrote it down somewhere, but I've yet to see it. So maybe he was tracking it. Um, but they were really looking at the shop, how busy we are, like how busy they are, and then saying, should we price this lower, high?
And so, did you come in and just start building spreadsheets to figure this out, or using
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
nothing
just
to
like
know
ripping it
business
all in
software?
Excel. No,
Really?
no business software. I actually think sometimes less is more. I'm sure I'll look back at this and be like, wow, that was idiotic. But for now, it's working just based on our volume.
Is there an opportunity to build customized software, or software specific to small businesses that manufacture?
Internally or like an external?
Either. Is there a solution that's affordable that would solve this? Because one of the things I see a lot on X, because I'm on X, I mean, I follow you for some time, is, oh, well, LLMs and AI agents will just auto configure precisely the software you need, because one size fits all CRMs and other, like, big, business software packages just aren't optimal, and they're too expensive and complex for small businesses. So, these new platforms will solve that. I'm not convinced. Maybe they will. What's your point of view on this?
Yeah, I think the reason I hesitated to answer that question is because the answer is probably no. Everything seems to miss the mark by maybe 10 to 20% of what we wanted to do. And the cost, even if it was free, it's like, this can't solve my problem. I'm still doing manual. I'm still doing it the manual way. So it also just makes sense to spend the extra time, save the money to do it the manual way and just track it kind of with grit.
Grit meaning Excel and a really smart person.
Yeah, and sometimes a stack of
Uh,
paper.
mm.
But who else are you paying attention to, both for people that are further along in their career, further along the path, but also other younger entrepreneurs who are like out here trying to do it? Like, has there been anybody in particular that you're like, I don't know, like a fellow traveler, like you're like, all right, I see somebody else on the grind, like, and you learn a lot from them?
I listened to a great podcast that I really I guess aligned with, and it was with Austin Bishop. I forget who did the podcast, but I think he has a lot of good things to say about reindustrializing. I mean, it's obvious that he's one of the founders of the conferences, but I think what him and Aaron have to say is really good. And same with Chris. Like Chris Power does a lot of great podcasts that speak to the machine shop problem a lot and like the manufacturing loss. Otherwise, Jack Watson on Twitter is doing some really cool stuff of like legacy family businesses. I think the majority of getting young people into manufacturing will be through family, um, kind of as like, the easiest way to do it. And I think he's kind of a leader in that space, showing that like, hey, go work with mom and pops, get in the factory. So I like following his stuff. And then Julian Fried is taking an interesting approach to like kind of this indie hacking, like manufacturing. So those are some people I like following and listening to.
When you were putting together the deal, did you, at a province or national level, was there any sort of like programs that incentives or tax breaks or anything for manufacturing specifically that helped you on the deal?
No, it was nothing. And I think our team was set up well to know if that was in place, and there's nothing.
Why do you think that is? Did you get any insight when you were talking to people?
What I think it is, there's more incentives on like the macro stuff. So I think those guys are more caring about how do we get how do we get 2,500 jobs in a factory in our hometown, not how do we spur the small shops. So I think that's what it is. Like the recent Anduril thing, I think that makes more impact for them than setting up a loan program and kind of having to do the diligence on all those deals. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it is.
I guess I'm expressing some shock that like in especially in Windsor, especially like, in a manufacturing town, there wasn't more of an idea that like, hey, we actually want to keep this nationally owned by a citizen who's going to keep the business here and not sell it to like a international PE firm or any. There wasn't any sort of helping hand that you guys were aware of.
Yeah, there is nothing. And like I said earlier, I think our team was well set up to know if that was in place.
Do you think not to make you the voice of a generation or anything, like not to put that on you, but like, do you think that if there were some sort of more national level discussion about like, hey, we want these businesses to stay here, do you think more of your peers and people that are maybe like still in software or still pursuing now traditional roles would be more interested in that?
I think it's a good idea in like really good faith, but I don't see that being the solution. I know like I went to a startup accelerator in Toronto and it was great, but like no one was looking at hardware, no one was looking at manufacturing. And just because there's some, incentive, I don't think it would change their minds. There is a hint of reindustrializing Canada as well. And I still don't think that message is getting out to the right people. And I think one of the best solutions right now is like reindustrialize. Like I'm trying to get people from Windsor to go to that event right now. But I could see incentives working for people that are already in manufacturing, maybe who are a foreman at a shop or a plant manager to say, hey, I'm going to open my own. But honestly, like shop owners in Windsor do really well. So I think it's a tricky one.
When I was, working the self-driving industry, we struggled with, actively recruiting young people who had some software background. And so this was in Pittsburgh. So we were sponsors of this thing called the First Robotics Competition. And the hopes were that some kids coming out of First Robotics they could just skip college and come straight to working for us. Like we had absolutely no requirement of a college degree to work on software for self-driving cars. So w- what is the active path towards creating a generation of people who will want to come and take these machinists and maintenance roles? I mean, I think you said on your X account there's 150 or 160,000 unfilled roles. So how do the companies like yours or a constellation of companies like yours activate a pipeline to get people to work for you?
Not swerving that question a bit is actually that we're losing manufacturing capacity. So like a lot of these jobs are being lost just because machine shops, like owners are retiring or shutting down. I think part of the act to get people in these jobs is actually getting people to own these factories and selling them to the right people and truly reindustrializing them. With this shop, I think I'm in the minority of people because it's really dirty, it's really grimy, and none of these shops are sexy or like a cool place to work. So I think I think it's a really tough problem. I think this is why like I always urge people to like step foot in a factory because you'll see the problem. They all look the same. They kind of have poor cultures, and it's just really hard to get people excited about working in that kind of environment too.
I mean, but I imagine that because these skills are so critical, that there is job security for someone who's great at it. So it's a marketing problem?
I think it comes down to a pay problem. I think that's the ultimate problem. Um, the auto industry has its fair share of layoffs. I think that's also a problem. So more steady work. Um, there's a payment problem. There's like terms problems. You're waiting a 90, 120 days. That's killing a lot of shops. That's why, earlier I spoke, we really need to check their like ARAP health. And so yeah, I think there's like financial pressure and like how do you make productivity gains to make these shops better over time and being able to pay their people better. Because at the end of the day, if you pay people, they will show up.
Do you feel like, and I'm less talking about racking in specifics, but more of the type of business you are, which is that you're a business selling to other manufacturing. Does it feel like that's going to be a challenge that you can solve, or you see ways to start solving, to be able to do forecasting to say, like, if we had this much sales, this will be the time that we want to reinvest in like capex this quarter to expand out our capacity.
Yeah, I think okay, I understand now. So I think you're right. I think it really comes down to trusting your sales team and like trust through numbers, like hitting your quota and like knowing you have a comfortable enough buffer to be able to afford something in scale. And because if you just have a really good year and and you think you don't have any idea if your next year might be horrible, you just invest in all this capex and your business kind of going under. Um, so I think having like really good leadership and really good people that are going to hit their numbers consistently and being able to trust that you can afford it. I think something I've learned and I'm really looking forward to learn is to run a good manufacturing business. You actually have to be really good at finance and like understanding numbers and accounting. Um, so that's something that that's probably the challenge I'm most looking forward to and learning.
If you hadn't bought this company, um, what was the second choice, and what in terms of what was the second choice company building?
Yeah, the second choice is actually nothing. Like we looked at a few companies and like I think this is one of the biggest problems again to reindustrialization is like a lot of these companies are in bad shape. And I think there's definitely a problem to be solved there. So I would have been continuing to look as a second option. We looked at one company that was in good business shape, but it ended up being honestly, like too complex, like from like an automation standpoint for something that I could like really get in and add value to. So we were really looking for something a little bit more, bite size, like machine shop instead of like these automation lines. But I still think I would have liked to get into injection molding. I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve there and kind of like use all the new technologies that are available to us and like implement them into like your sales processes and your quoting processes and then your actually engineering changes. So I think injection molding there or CNC is a little tougher. I think there's more competition, but probably injection molding. But
How common, like, what were the common uh, mistakes or like places in the business that were failing that caused you guys to say, no, not this one. This is not even worth our time.
yeah, there's some that are easy to fix and some that aren't. Like debt is a very, very common one. And that's just like almost a lot of the time impossible to fix. Or if not, you're just fighting an uphill battle. It's like, why pick that company when you pick a healthy one? And then there's also problems that are a bit easier to fix, but I guess to stick on the hard ones, like machinery is sometimes a tough one because if they're making all these parts in these 40-year-old machines, you can't really get rid of them. You don't have the money to upgrade them. So you're kind of in this standstill of like, hey, we need to grow this thing on the current machines and still make good parts at the same time. Some of the easier problems to fix and actually the ones that could be attractive to buyers. Um, well, it's a little sad sometimes if they're overstaffed. You can kind of lean out the team and kind of start over and hopefully hire those people back as you scale, but just to get the company into better financial shape to invest in itself. So yeah, I'd say it's kind of like its infrastructure, its teams, and then the debt, the people, and then also how they manage their floor space. Like a lot of companies will be in like, 4 buildings when they could really be in one, and then their kind of rent to revenue ratio or rent to profit ratio is too high. So just kind of thinking about those things.
What's a 10 or 20-year plan for Delta 70? Are you going to hold this and build a portfolio of small manufacturing, or are you going to expand this business into really cool industrial grade, but potential goods for the like storage for the home? Like I love industrial style. I hate going to. I'm like I have a huge record collection. I have all kinds. I have massive amounts of auto parts. Like what does anyone sell domestically manufactured racks for people who want stuff for home?
I think it'd be cool. I mean, I love kind of the industrial vibe too. One of my buddies has like an old brick factory office. I think it's awesome. But I think the real 10 to 20-year plan is kind of getting some of where our competitors are. So we have a competitor that does the exact same capabilities as us, and they do 120 million a year. And then we have another competitor that does what we do plus plastic racking, and they do about 1 billion a year. So I really think the sky's the limit. It's like, how do we effectively scale to that, like that first level of like, 100 million in revenue, and then hopefully through acquisitions and adding product lines that we can get to an even bigger company one day. So that's thinking really big, but I think it's good to think big. And
I'm looking to buy racks for my factory because I'm building the Model 4. Why am I going to pick Delta 70, who's at this point now scrappy upstart versus one of the billion-dollar racking companies? What makes you guys different?
I think what makes us different is our customer service. Since we're such a small team, we're really like hold your hand every part of the way. I'm still new. I'm still learning, but part of the reason I guess we bought this business because the amazing team that's there and really knows React so well. They've been doing it for 50 years. And from our office staff to our welders, I think it's our people, and we can pay attention to you. We don't have too many customers right now. We like taking on complex projects. We're in the midst of growing, so you can grow with us and tell us how to be better. We love listening to feedback. We just added in-house design. So if you want to give us a part and have us design the rack, that's something we just added. So if you want great customer service, you want to grow with us, and you want a partner that you can trust, you should go with Delta 70. I hope that was good. I gotta work on that.
I think it's pretty solid. The website for the company is delta7070.com, and they are standing by. Thanks a lot again for coming by. You have a good one.
Yeah, thank you guys. Excited to see the pods.